Okay, so have you ever like noticed how much talk there is about the South African economy?
Oh, yeah.
It's like every day there's another headline about it struggling and everything.
Right.
So today we're doing this deep dive into something that's like right at the center of all those economic problems.
Hmm.
The South African Reserve Bank,
Okay.
the SARB.
Yes, R.
Yeah. And more specifically, like who owns it?
Mm.
We found some viral TikTok videos
Okay.
and a really, really interesting opinion piece that we found from Rebuild South Africa.
Yeah.
And they're all arguing that the SARB should be nationalized.
It's interesting because for a lot of people, this is like the first time that they're actually thinking about like who owns the thing that controls their money, right? Their country's money.
Totally. Like you just assume the government's running it, right?
Right.
But that's not the whole picture here.
Yeah.
It turns out that like the SARB has about 2,000 private shareholders,
Yeah.
including some people.
Yeah.
And even companies from outside South Africa.
That's right. Now, these shareholders don't get to directly like set interest rates or anything like that, but they do receive dividends.
Uh-huh.
So meaning, they're profiting from the bank's operations.
Right.
And, especially in a country like South Africa, which has such a history of economic inequality, this kind of setup, it raises some eyebrows.
Oh, for sure. And that's where, like, those TikTok videos get really, really interesting.
Yeah.
One user at Ryan Milo compared owning shares in the SARB to, like, neighbors owning his family's bank account.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which is such a crazy analogy.
Such a good analogy, though. It really kind of, like, sums it up in a way that, like, makes sense to people.
It does.
Yeah.
And it clearly struck a nerve because a lot of the comments were reflecting, like, anxiety is about control, fairness.
Yeah.
It's almost like people are saying, wait, if some of the profits from our central bank are going to, like, these private people, how's that helping me?
Right. Exactly. How is that benefiting me or my community?
Totally.
Yeah.
And, that is actually one of the big arguments in that Rebuild South Africa opinion piece.
Okay.
They're saying that this whole system, like where you have private people profiting from the central bank, it creates like a conflict of interest.
Okay.
Their argument is that shareholders who are driven by profit might just care more about like those returns than they do about the well-being of, normal people in South Africa.
They point to things like high interest rates, which benefit investors but make it harder for people to like get loans,
Right.
manage their debt, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Rebuild South Africa argues that if the SARB were nationalized, then it could set policies that actually support things that would help people, like job creation and economic growth.
And that's not their only point either.
Right.
They also claim that this whole private ownership thing makes the SARB like less accountable.
Mm-hmm.
They even bring up that 2017 Rand manipulation scandal. Do you remember that?
Yeah, vaguely. Remind me.
Some banks were accused of like messing with the currency
Right.
to like benefit themselves.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And Rebuild South Africa, they're saying that if the SARB was totally under government control, then there'd be more transparency,
Yeah.
less chance of that kind of thing happening.
They want a system where the people, through their elected officials, have a say in how the central bank is run.
Totally.
Yeah.
And like on top of all of that, they're saying that the government's actually paying a ton of money in interest on the loans that they have to take from the SARB.
Oh, wow.
And that's taxpayer money going back to the bank.
Right.
Which, like, they say doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I see their point.
They think that nationalizing it would allow the government to take all those funds and put it towards other things, like social programs, education, infrastructure.
It's a compelling argument for sure. They're basically painting this picture of a nationalized SARB that could be like this really powerful tool, for economic upliftment and a more equal society.
That's quite the vision. But I have to admit, I was reading through those TikTok comments.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of skepticism, too.
Oh, of course. Of course. Not everyone's convinced.
Yeah, a lot of people are expressing concern about whether the government could even manage the SARB well.
Yeah, that's fair.
Especially with all the problems that we've seen with some of the other like state-run companies in South Africa.
This is a big point. Some people are worried that if you nationalize the SARB, it could become like too influenced by politics.
Yeah.
And they point to a history of like things not being managed well and even corruption with some of the state-owned enterprises.
Yeah.
And they just think that putting the SARB, right under the government's control, it might not be the best solution.
Like they're saying, like, yeah, okay, the current system's not perfect, but like, is giving even more power to the government really the answer?
Exactly. Yeah. And that tension between like wanting change, but also being afraid of what might happen if you change things,
Yeah.
that's really what's at the heart of this whole debate.
Totally. And speaking of tension and consequences,
Uh-oh.
things get really interesting when we start to look at this one guy,
Okay.
a former ARB director named Stephen Goodson.
Ah, yes. Now, Goodson was a bit of a controversial figure.
Yeah, he was a big advocate for nationalizing the SARB,
Right.
and his views didn't exactly make him friends with everyone.
Right. And like the circumstances around his removal from the SARB board and then, his death, while unconfirmed, definitely add like a layer of mystery to this whole conversation.
It's crazy how his story has kind of become like intertwined with this whole debate.
Totally.
You see it in those TikTok videos. Like,
Yeah.
remember that one by Ed Zamesmethethwa, the one that's called the actual interview that killed Stephen Goodson?
Yeah.
Which is probably a bit dramatic.
Yeah.
But it kind of shows how intense people feel about this issue.
And then you've got the economic freedom fighters, the EFF, like a major political party here.
Right. They've been calling for nationalizing the SARB for like years.
Yeah, years.
And we see that like in the TikTok comments too.
Yeah.
People like at user 3686095221075 and at dbang specifically mentioned the EFF's stance.
The EFS position adds like another layer of complexity to all of this because it's not just about the SARB.
Right.
Their call for nationalization is part of this bigger political idea, where they want to address economic inequality and stuff from the past.
Yeah.
So it's not just this one thing, it's about everything.
So, okay, we've got all these different people and opinions going on around this whole issue, but let's go back to rebuild South Africa.
Yeah.
You mentioned they're kind of painting this picture of what a nationalized SARB would look like.
Right.
So what would that actually look like?
So basically, they want a SARB that only works to help South Africans.
Okay.
Imagine like lower interest rates. So it's
Right.
easier for people to get loans, to buy homes, to start businesses, all of that.
Yeah.
And then all that money that the government's currently spending on like interest payments,
Right.
they think that could go to like, important social programs, fixing up roads and bridges, building schools, creating jobs, all that.
So, okay, so their argument is that a nationalized SARB could really help the economy grow and give people more opportunities, especially the people who haven't really benefited that much.
Yeah, exactly.
They're saying a nationalized SARB would have more freedom to like focus on helping regular South Africans.
Especially those in like marginalized communities.
It's a powerful idea, but I do wonder, like, are there downsides they might be missing?
That's a good question.
Like, could nationalization backfire somehow?
Yeah, and this is where those worries about politics getting involved become really important, right?
Yeah.
Critics of nationalization, they say that if the government has total control of the SARB, there's a chance they might try to use it for their own political gain, even if it ends up hurting the economy later on.
Yeah, it's like that whole thing. Power corrupts.
Exactly.
The concern is that even if politicians start with good intentions,
Right.
they might be tempted to, like, mess with the SARB to get what they want.
Like maybe lowering interest rates before an election to make the economy look better than it actually is.
Exactly. So it sounds like the big challenge is, like, how do we balance the good things about government control with the very real risks of them, like abusing that power?
Yeah. It's not simple.
It doesn't sound simple at all.
And then there's also the question of like, practically, does the government even have the skills and knowledge to run something as complicated as the SARB?
Right. Yeah, because, like, let's be real, some of the other state-run companies in South Africa, they haven't exactly done a great job.
No, they haven't.
Think about Eskom,
Oh, yeah.
the power company, SAA, the airline.
Right.
Lots of mismanagement and debt there.
That makes people nervous about the government taking over the SARB.
For sure.
They see that stuff and they're like, nope, not doing that again.
They don't want to see the same thing happen with the SARB.
Exactly. They're worried that nationalizing the SARB could just create another Eskom,
Right.
another SAA, and that it would end up hurting the very people it's supposed to help.
So we've got Rebuild South Africa saying the current system is unfair and that nationalization is the only way to fix it.
Right.
But then you got those worries about whether the government can be trusted with that much power.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's like, who do you believe?
It is. It really is. It comes down to this. Who do we trust more?
Yeah.
Who do we think actually cares about the people and wants to help them?
That's a question that goes way beyond just the SARB.
For sure. It's about so much more than that.
It's about how we create a system where the people have a voice
Right.
and where the economy actually works for everyone.
Yeah. And figuring out how to do that, there's no easy answer.
Well, this has been really interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface here.
It feels like this whole thing with the South African Reserve Bank, it's kind of like a mini version of all the big problems South Africa's dealing with.
Yeah, it's like all of South Africa's history and economics and politics all wrapped up in this one place.
Right. And it's not just about money, you
Right.
know, it's about like who's really in charge and what kind of country we want.
Yeah, and it's really cool how this conversation is happening, like not just in Parliament or like fancy offices,
Right.
but like on TikTok.
I know.
Regular people are talking about this complicated stuff and sharing their opinions.
It shows that people are starting to understand how important the SARB is, you know?
Totally.
And that they're not going to just sit back and let other people decide things for them.
So, okay, for someone listening who's like, this SARB stuff sounds confusing, why should I care?
Yeah.
Why does it matter who owns the SARB?
Yeah.
Like, how does it affect normal people?
It matters because the SARB makes decisions that affect everyone in South Africa, like literally everyone. When they set interest rates, that changes how much people pay for loans, how much money they make from their savings,
Right.
even how much stuff costs at the store.
Wow.
It affects businesses, whether they do well or go broke, whether people can afford to buy a house or start their own business.
So it's not just some like theoretical thing.
No, not at all.
It's about real people's lives.
Absolutely. And that's why this whole debate about nationalizing the SARB is so important.
Yeah.
It's really about like who gets to decide how the economy works.
And who benefits from it.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been really interesting, but we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to learn about this.
We really want to encourage you to like keep looking into this and make up your own mind about it.
Read different opinions, talk to people, do your own research.
So here's the big question we'll leave you with.
Okay.
Do you think South Africa should nationalize the Reserve Bank? What would that mean for the country? It's a big decision with big consequences, and it's something every South African should be thinking about.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the South African Reserve Bank. Until next time, keep asking questions and keep learning.
And keep talking about this stuff.
See you next time.